I did see him maybe two days ago.
I love your use of colors.
Thank you. I tried.
It's awesome.
I knew you were going to be here, so you were going to show the colors.
Show the colors, right? I'm usually a gray and black person, so.
Well, around here you have to have a little green.
I know.
Okay, I think
So you've been keeping up with all the UCF fiascos going on.
Well, I saw that yesterday that the president
He resigned.
stepped down.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the details of what they had a grant.
They had that grant that was not meant to, it was meant for a specific, grants are set up as specific things.
Yeah.
You should know
Yes,
that,
I know
right?
very well. Believe me.
They took that money and built the building.
Yeah, so
I'm like,
good.
not kosher.
Oh, thank you.
And he was the provost, I guess, at that time. This was Satya. So his fingers were all over it. So.
I know that when I was at the US DOT for a couple of years, there were some universities who used transportation grants to build buildings.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
And it wasn't jumping. What I'm hearing is it was like 85 million. That it was.
Yeah.
It was a big amount. So.
Well, we already have a building. I don't know what money was used to build this building.
I doubt it. Now they would have figured that out by now. Because when I was here, you guys thought it was in the trailer. So it's nice to have a building,
All right, let's get started. We are very happy to have Mrs. Satya Lory from Jacobs Engineering Group and Company. And she actually is a USF alumnus. So she's the vice president and the operations leader of the Jacobs Engineering. She got a bachelor degree in civil engineering from the National Institute of Technology in India and a master's degree in civil engineering here at the USF. And then she got an MBA from the University of Tampa. And she started her career as a bridge designer, and then she moved to the position of project management and program management. And over almost 30 years career in the program and project management positions, she had experience with a variety of projects. And one of them is the most recent one is the I-4 Ultimate, PPP project, which is about like 2.3 billion project with Jacobs Engineering. So today she's going to share with us about the her experience and knowledge in the innovative contract for the infrastructure projects. So please join me in welcome her.
Thank you. So I'm here today because Rob convinced me that this is a great opportunity to talk to you all, and I love talking to students. I used to do that quite a bit when I lived here in Tampa, even after I graduated. I moved to Orlando 15 years ago, so I've really not had an opportunity to come to classroom sessions and talk to folks. So as he said, my name's Satya Lory, and he wanted me to go ahead and put a pitch in. So Jacobs has several offices across the state, and one of our offices is here in Tampa that I come to quite a bit. And we hire interns all the time, so you need to keep up with our recruiting side. We currently have 2 interns in the transportation department and 1 in the structures department. So that's something that we encourage a lot. We don't look for just summer interns. We actually look for interns who can do year-round, right? So that you can adjust your schedule to give us 20 hours a week or something and work with us. It's a great experience to understand what the industry does, and you get to experience how the design happens. So I'm going to talk about innovative contracting and infrastructure. So it's not a very design technical topic, but today it's very prevalent and very important to me because the reason the innovative contracting approaches started was because of all the congestion and no money to build roadways. And I got stuck on I-4 I called him and I said, I'm stuck on I-4 in Plant City and I'm trying to make it in. So it's very appropriate for me for today. So.
Is there a clicker? No, that's not it. That's not it.
All right, we got both. I can just use that.
Perfect.
All right. So let's start talking about how normal infrastructure projects are funded. So the congestion, as you know, warrants a lot of additional lanes, but the biggest issue that we've had and we've faced over the years is the funding. Funding generally comes from the Highway Trust Fund when it's a standard project, when it's coming from a federal funding, or a state has their own funding from the license plate taxes that they pull out of it. So, but the majority of the main systems that FDOT, the Florida Department of Transportation, builds is all coming out of the Highway Trust Fund. And as you can see, the last time the trust fund amount was actually established was in 1993, 25 years ago. Nothing has changed in the amount that comes out of a gas. Every time you pump gas, there's a certain percentage. It's like 18.6 cents, I think, that goes to this Highway Trust Fund. That has not changed since 1993. So as you can imagine, cost of everything has gone up, construction has gone up, and there was no funding to do it because nobody wants to take the initiative to add more taxes, right? You know how politics works, no more taxes. So in addition to that, the efficiencies from the cars, all the Priuses of the world have really reduced the amount of gas that you purchase. So there you go, you again have a reduction in the highway trust fund. So when you look at the entities like the state and local governments trying to build something, they had to look for alternative ways to fund projects so that they can build it. So what I want to do is kind of go through the normal contract types and then kind of talk through the alternative funding. So you have an understanding of all the different facets of funding that we go through in the transportation industry. My team predominantly does infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, toll roads, all of that. So the standard state and federal and local funding is usually used to do what we call a design bid build job, right? Which is the standard process. You have a set of plans, you let it out to bid, and a contractor bids and constructs it. And I'll go through the details of that. A design build is where the contractor and the designer are on one team and bidding on a job together. And then you have the alternative funding, which is a design build finance, which is basically design build, but has a financing aspect to it. And then you have the design build finance, operate, maintain. So this one is what we always refer to as the P3, the public-private partnership. So when we go through that, you'll understand the distinct difference between a design build finance and a P3. So let's talk about design bid build. Like I said, it's commonly used by DOT and all the other public agencies. Design's always funded from the federal funds, the state funds, any local funds. It does, like sometimes there are counties who want to put in some money to build their system, so there's local funds coming in addition to the state funds. And the owner, in this case, let's talk through FDOT because that's where I tend to, that's my realm of work. So the owner is FDOT. So FDOT will contract with the design firm. So what they do is the design firm is selected based on, Florida requires it to be a qualitative selection, not a price-based selection for design. So we comply with what's called a CCNA Act, which is a legislative act. It's a Consultant Competitive Negotiations Act. So the selection for a designer is purely based on you presenting on the project and showing your expertise and showing your qualifications, and you get shortlisted, you gotta go present to the owner, and you win the job. So when you win the job, you are the designer for that project, right? So you go through the process of identifying additional right-of-way, utility conflicts, doing all that, which takes about 2 to 2.5 years if it's a substantial widening job, right? And then sometimes right-of-way takes a little longer. So you're going through all this process to make sure that you have everything in compliance with the scope as well as pretty good shape because the contractor is gonna come bid on it, right? You don't want any errors in it because errors basically come back to the designer. So the designer ends up designing it, signing and sealing it, and then it goes out for an advertisement for a contractor to bid on. Well, the contractor's bid is purely based on low bid. No qualifications come into the picture. So the owner doesn't get the benefit of knowing if a contractor is really good at this type of project because we have seen situations where a new contractor is trying to come into the state to do work and they really don't know the nuances of FDOT's work and they end up low bidding it just to win the job. We call it buying a job, right? When you see a job that's way low bid, all the engineers panic, I'll be honest with you, because they're looking for errors and omissions to try to recover their cost. So that's kind of a common theme. If you see a new contractor want a job, you're all fingers crossed, right? So the contractor bids on it and they have a duration that they are required to meet, the scheduled duration, and they build the job. So like I said, the owner has 2 separate contracts, one with the designer and one with the contractor. And while the construction is going on, the designer actually goes through and does what we call post-design services, which is basically supporting the contractor. You have request for information, RFIs, you have shop drawings, all of that come to the original engineer of record, and we go through and support the contractor to make sure it's built per our plans and built for the scope that the owner was expecting. So let's go into a design build job. So this became quite popular actually in Florida in the early 90s, right? So the main incentive to do a design build is how it can accelerate a job. That's the main reason it all started getting very popular. And then it got really popular for a while and then backed off because it had its own issues. So the way a design build works is funding again comes from the owner. You know, the owner brings in federal, state, or local funding, funds the job. The owner establishes an RFP, a request for proposal. So the request for proposal includes the scope of the project, the specifics of the project that the owner wants, the level of detail that the owner wants in terms of where the accesses are at the ramps for the interchanges, all of that, it's very defined so that a contractor just can't come build whatever the contractor wants to build, right? It needs to be what the owner's final outcome is. So the owner's responsibility is to do the RFP. Once the RFP is advertised, now go through the process of how the selection happens. The future responsibility of the owner after that is purely review and oversight. So you'll have reviews of the design plans. So they'll review to make sure that the designer is providing the plans per the scope in the RFP. And they do the construction oversight. So there'll be somebody in the field called the Construction Engineer Inspection, CEI. Lots of abbreviations here. So the CEI oversees the construction. The CEI oversees for the design bid build too, the construction of it. So the design build team, this is the difference, right? Remember how I said the owner has a contract with the contractor and the designer. In this case, the owner has only one contract. It goes to the contractor. The contractor has sub-agreements with the designer as well as all the subcontractors that he or she has to use for, say, bridges or utility relocation or whatever it is. So the owner is really only directly in communication with one person per se, in terms of the contract terms, which makes it easier for them. Of course, they're communicating quite a bit with the designer because the designer's criteria needs to be what they're looking for. So like I said, the designer is a sub-consultant to the contractor, and the big difference that you see is the last bullet. The bid is actually the overall proposal, and the bid is based on qualifications and price and schedule. So remember when I said design bid build, they have no hook for the contractor to see if the contractor can do this kind of work or good work. In the design build, there is, in the phases as they go through to select, they do give a grade for the contractor. So they have mechanisms to kind of put somebody out if they don't want them in the overall picture.
And can construction start before the design is at 100%?
Yeah, I was gonna go through that. That's the other big advantage, the schedule advantage they're gonna get. So the contract process, you'll have the RFP, the owner puts out. So it comes out as an advertisement. So us, like we do quite a bit of design build, so we team up with the contractor, come to our terms and conditions agreement and what our role is, what their role is, and who are the sub-consultants that we have who are gonna support us. And we put that team together and we go forward to respond to the RFP, right? The owner takes that response and shortlists, grades the response, right? So there's a phase 1 and a phase 2. Phase 1 is that first stage where what we call the expanded letter of interest. Expanded letter of interest, they have specific criteria that they want you to show them to see if you are qualified to do the job, which includes grades for the contractor, the fatalities they've had, right? Things like that come into play. So it's not just the designer's qualifications, they're looking at the contractor's qualifications. So there's point system that they break it down into. There's 5 major criteria they break it down into, and it's 20 points total. So that point system is what the ranking is based on, right? So when the owner releases that point system out, they don't, for a design build job, a lot of times they don't shortlist per se. They'll do the ranking, right? And based on the ranking, the contractor team makes the decision if they want to go to the phase 2, because each point, it's an adjusted score, it's tied to the price. So if you're way off from the first ranked person by 3 points, and the project's worth 100 million, yeah, that's a lot of points you're leaving on the table, right? A lot of money you're leaving on the table. So it's hard for them to overcome that in a bid. So a lot of times they tend to walk away from it. So the design build team that decides to go forward to phase 2, they'll go ahead and prepare the plans, and so it's a very collaborative effort. When I first started doing design builds, I'm gonna date myself, it was in '97, right? And it was fun for me because I always did design in an office, and then once in a while I got an opportunity to go out in the field if I had some questions in the field. My background was bridge design, and I really wanted to see how things were built. And with the design build, you already build that relationship with your partner, the contractor, so you get to talk through, hey, we want to build this way, do you have any other tricks that you want to do to get it done faster? So you really are collaborative working with that contractor to make sure you're finding the best way to design things, because as you know, in transportation, you have to phase the construction, right? There's a lot of nuances with that. So it's a great opportunity to kind of learn a lot through the plans preparation phase, through the bid process, right? So we end up having to do plans which are not 100% signed and sealed, right? They're plans that are ready to have a contractor bid on it. So the RFP will say, we need X, Y, and Z plans, right? We need this to confirm, because that becomes their contract document to say you have agreed to do all these things. But in addition to that, we have to do some more details for the contractor, because the contractor needs that to bid it, because what he's putting in as a price, that's it, right? The owner is signing off on that agreement, and he's not gonna get to change it. So even during the bidding process, there's a lot of coordination going on between the contractor and the designers and all the sub-consultants, geotech, all these other people. So the design build firm also prepares the schedule, because the owner has a limit on the schedule. A lot of times they say, this is your max. If you can't meet the max, you have to put your schedule duration. If you can't meet the max, you get thrown out. You're automatically disqualified. So the benefits to the owner on a design build, like I said, when they set up an RFP, and over the years, FDOT has learned that they had to really tighten their screws on their RFP, right? There'll be little things that were here and there that somebody would figure out that the language is not a shall, right? Shall is like a confirmed language. Or if you say, you will do this, right? The argument came back that you didn't say you shall do this, so we changed it. Now you can't tell me I can't build it that way. So a lot of the RFP language got very, very tweaked because of it, because they didn't want contractors figuring out ways to get around it. So once the owner does a good RFP, they've basically transferred all the risk to the contractor team, right? Excuse me. Because the owner only provides as part of the RFP what they call, what do they call it? Informational plans, right? Informational documents. So the plans are more conceptual. If they give you any geotech, because they did some geotech, it's informational. It's like, take it at your own risk. If you want to know more about what's going on in the ground, you better go do your geotech before you put that bid in, right? So all that risk gets transferred to the design build team, which is great for the owner, because there's a lot of things that you discover as you go through and do final design. So that's why owners like the fact that the risk gets transferred. But the other big thing that it actually started getting very popular is because of what we call the alternative technical concepts. So during a bid phase, so once they once they do the phase one, right, it depends on the project size. So when we talk about I-4, I'll tell you the I-4 Ultimate project, $2.3 billion job. I think it took us around 11 months, I think, from when we decided to move forward to when we actually got everything submitted, because the effort is substantial, right? So during that phase, you do these things called alternative technical concepts. So for example, you can take an interchange, and the owner comes up with a concept that it's a certain type of bridge or a certain span configuration. If you have something innovative, you can come present it to the owner and say, hey, here's what I want to do instead of what you're asking me to do in your concept, and here's why you're getting the benefit of it. Well, a lot of times contractors' benefit is a cost, right? They're looking at the price side of it. And as long as you can justify it to the owner that there's a good benefit for it, and you have not drastically changed the scope of that interchange, that is yours. You get to go bid on it based on your ATC. Nobody else who's on the other teams will get to hear about it. Unless there's a true scope change, the owner does not have to re-release the RFP, which is great. I mean, we threw out like 60 some ATCs on I-4, right? Not everything stuck. You sometimes throw things out just to see, test the waters on the scope a little bit to see if they'll bite on it. So that's a great way for them to even save money, right? Because now all of a sudden you're getting new creative ideas from the team. And the shorter schedule, so to go back to your question, that's the big difference. So remember the design build. The designer designs, goes through 2.5 years, signs and seals, then the contractor starts constructing. In this case, what we do is, once you win the job, you start breaking it out as packages, right? So the initial package would be clearing and grubbing, clearing out for the contractor to come through and do like a temporary payment or whatever it is, right? So you're not trying to design the entire 100% set of plans for the entire job. If it's a 3-mile job, you're just going to do, so it's basically based on each of your MOT phases, right? You're kind of looking at it saying, okay, my first phase includes this. Give me a set of plans for that. Owner reviews it, releases it for construction. It's called RFC plans. Contractors out there. So normally a design build job, because contractors are so hungry to get their job done and paid and get out, you don't really get the duration that you normally would get on a bid build job, even with all the packages, right? So say it's a 2 to 4 lane widening job, normally it takes about 2.5 years for a designer to do it. They'll give us 6 to 7 months to do it. That's how fast-paced these projects are. So it's a lot of burnout happening on the design side, But the benefit is, like you said, construction starts right away and you're working with them and they may see things in the field and you're doing the next package and they say, hey, fix this, right?
Mhm.
We saw this in the field. So it's kind of a nice way to do the design because you're actually working with them side by side and looking at different options. And the schedule is completely shortened. I mean, the design schedule is like hardly any design schedule. When you go to I-4, you'll be floored how quickly we delivered that project. So, and the selection, like I said, is based on quals and price, which is a good benefit for the owner. The disadvantage is, so once that contract's locked in with the RFP, say the owner wants to make a change, right? Contractors usually are not very, they don't have a big appetite for the change, only because they know, okay, now it's gonna throw a kink into my schedule and a kink into what I have already planned. And a lot of times that's where a contractor is trying to get some more schedule time and some more money, right? Somewhere they have to, because the bid is a big difference. So when they're trying to low bid it, the minute the owner asks for a change, every average price shoots up with the contractor because they're like, I'm gonna make some money off of this. You really need this change, right? I'm gonna make money off of this. So a lot of times owners get stuck that they can't make any major changes and they kind of have to hold back on their changes. And the other thing that the owners have complained about, which I don't think is truly factual, is they feel like they don't have as much leverage with the designer, right? They say, we know you know the criteria, but the contractor is always trying to finagle something and you're getting paid by the contractor, your agreement is with the contractor, so there's less opportunity for us to dictate. And the problem with dictating from the owner's standpoint, if the owner says, I want you to change this to this, if what I presented was per criteria, per RFP, that's called a required change by the owner, so they have to pay me for it. To make that change, they have to pay the contractor for the change. So reviewers had to get trained saying you cannot go, if something is working and it's fine, you cannot go ask for a want just because you want it that way, because that's what I'm used to doing. No, you can't do that, because they will ask for additional money in the schedule. So to give you an example about design build, so you all know about the Hart Franklin Bridge. It's going through procurement right now. There are people who have been, the phase 1 has not happened on that yet. So this is basically what I was talking about. So if you look at it, the phase 1 scores, this is over a score of 20, right? And you see all the additional contractors at the bottom. They just decided not to go to the phase 2 because their scores were substantially lower than phase 1, 16.8 to 13.8. That's 3 points on a $30 million job. People back off, right? So to the 3 and 4, a lot of times, I mean, the number 2 that's sitting in there, see, they had a score of 14. It was off by 2.8 points, but in the final ranking, they came in second because they really lowballed the bid. And to be honest with you, Pepper Contracting has done only very small jobs. So that's one who was trying to buy the job, basically. So the phase 2 score is over 80 points, so the total is always 100. So the phase 2 is where after the phase 1, you're doing your plans and preparing your proposal and all of that. So that is the score that you see in the second column. And if you look at the proposed time, everything says 520 except for Pepper, who's at 490, right? Mainly because contractor says, okay, I kind of need 520. I'm not going to go low ball it because of
That's
schedule.
days, right? 520 days.
520 days, right?
I think
And it's
working
calendar
days.
days.
Calendar days, okay.
Yes, contracting is always calendar
Yeah.
days. So the contractor, sometimes they have a formula that includes schedule, then they tighten this, right? This did not include a schedule formula. It was pure price and the phase scores is what it was. So if there is no schedule that ties you to winning that final number, they usually take the schedule that the department gives them. They don't want to deal with trying to squeeze it down, right? So, and the other reason that people tend to do things like this is the phase 2 is scored all at the same time, right? So they get to see that schedule when they're scoring the thing. So they say, oh, maybe I can get them to like swing a few points my way because I gave you a shorter schedule. So the final outcome is the adjusted score, which is basically this price divided by that plus that, right? Whoever gets the lowest adjusted score will end up winning the job. So in this case, it was Middlesex, and we work quite a bit with Middlesex, very, very good contractor to work with. And you know where this is, right? The total messed up loop ramp when you come off of 60 veterans to come onto 275, you know, that loop that goes there where you just sit in the traffic over there, that's what that is.
Okay.
They're actually modifying that to improve it. So let's go to design, build, finance.
And all that's public, all those numbers.
Everything's
Yeah.
public, and after the selection, the proposals are public. So if there's something that looks funky in the scores, somebody can protest it and say, I want to see all your scores and your proposals because I think you swayed your score for somebody. because the score details it. So the people who are scoring, there's usually at least 3 people in the technical review committee, so they get to see those scores, what added up to that 80 points, and if somebody looked like they swung it, they'll protest it. They'll say, I think you were trying to get this contractor to win the job, so we're gonna protest it. So design build finance, again, is basically the same concept as design build, but IROX is the best example for it. It was a 30-mile widening from 4 lanes to 6 lanes, right? The stretch through Lee and Collier County was a disaster through the 90s. You just could not get through there during peak time. The FDOT's funding was sitting over like a 6-year program. They could not get, because it was all broken into multiple projects, and they could not get the funding pulled in because that's the amount of money they had. So when they have a cash flow constraint, and they can, by legislation, they can defer it to a certain period within the work program. When they can do that, FDOT tends to want to go to the finance if they want to build it faster, because they don't want to wait till the overall funding comes 6 years from now and then do a design build. So in IROX's case, if you look at it, 30-mile widening, the original design bid build would have taken 8 to 10 years. So the contractor came in, did everything similar to the design build, right? The scores and all of that, but they have a financing arm to show FDOT how they're going to build this with the financing that they're going to pay for, and FDOT just repays them. It's like a loan. So the contractor gets a loan, FDOT pays back the loan, right? So they were able to do the entire job in 3 years. And FDOT got their job much faster, and they programmed their money and just paid them back. I think they paid them back in 6 years, and they were done. They were out of the picture, right? So DBFs are usually done only when they have in that sticky situation. You don't see that very commonly. IROX was actually the first one that they did in Florida. Then we had a job that we did on I-95 on the East Coast in Volusia County. But they don't tend to go to that very often. You know,
And this didn't involve tolling at all?
No tolling at all. So, because the way the toll projects work is that the agency is Florida Turnpike Enterprise. They're an arm of FDOT, right? They're one of the districts of FDOT. FDOT has 7 districts plus the Turnpike. Each district covers certain regions, right? So this area is covered by District 7, and Orlando is District 5. So the tolling money stays as part of that district. They can't take it and use it in District 5 or District 7, because their responsibility is to take that entire money, because the Turnpike goes across the state. So they make improvements across the state with what they collect, and do the maintenance improvements based on what they collect. So let's go to the fun one. Public-private partnership, P3s. So this has gotten, legislation allowed the state to do up to a certain amount. You can't take everything and convert it into a public-private partnership, only because legislation is concerned. One of the things you'll see is it's a concession agreement. It's a lot of times it's 35 years or 40 years, and concessionaires have defaulted, right? And the state ends up holding the bag on a bad project. So Florida legislation stipulates what can go into a P3 project, right? So when I go through the discussion, I'm going to talk about the I-4 Ultimate project, but I-4 Ultimate was set up as a 40-year concession, right? And the funding combination for P3s generally, I mean, it's not like the state's not putting in any money. They put in certain money, and then the private entity comes and finances the rest of it. But in this structure, they're financing more than just the construction. They're going to finance to maintain it and operate it for 40 years. So the amount they have to finance is substantially more. It's not just the construction cost. So when I say $2.3 billion, that's just the construction cost. Doesn't include the maintenance or any of the additional effects that they have out of doing that. So Port of Miami Tunnel, who all are familiar with that? You know where the port is? Oh man, you gotta drive that. It's an awesome tunnel.
Gotta get out more.
It's like the only tunnel in Florida. Come on, guys. You gotta drive that.
Field trip.
Huh?
Field trip.
Yeah, it is. It's definitely a nice.
Sponsored by Jacobs?
Yeah, it was designed by us. It was a 35-year concession project, but it was kind of cool because it was the first tunnel in Florida, so it was kind of a neat project to do. You know, we did a presentation on it, and you hear the oohs and the ahs about it. You know, when the tunnel boring mechanism, TBMs, come out of the ground. It's kind of neat when it comes out of the ground. So let's talk about I-4 Ultimate, so that way I can explain what a P3 concept is. So I-4 Ultimate originally was set up as multiple designs. I was actually the program manager, managing all the consultants, doing the 21 miles broken into 6 pieces, right? couldn't get money to build it because it was way too expensive, and DOT did not have the funds to do it. So they started talking about doing it as a P3 project. So it started out as we want to add 2 lanes each direction in the middle as a high occupancy HOV lane. But then the trend was going towards express lanes, toll lanes to speed up commute through this area. So I-4 Ultimate basically goes through downtown Orlando, the thickest most crowded part of Orlando. So it got converted to a 4 toll lanes in the middle. So as you can imagine, what it did was you had a roadway system with 3 lanes in each direction. Some had auxiliary lanes to exit and things like that. You had to blow it out to put the 4 lanes in the middle. So it was a complete reconstruction for pretty much most of the interchanges, right? There were a couple that was set up as they were building through. They knew they wanted to come and do something in the future, so they set it up to get that space. But pretty much all at downtown, and the downtown area was like 55-year-old bridges through the viaduct and stuff, so they wanted to blow all that out. So then the price went up, right? When you have to blow all that out, the cost went up. So what they ended up doing is saying, okay, let's make this a P3 job and put it out to the industry. And a lot of times the P3s, they'll come out to the industry and do an industry forum. The forum is basically to get feedback, right? They'll come up with a rough draft of the RFP and things that they want on the project and things that they're expecting out of the contract. And they get feedback from the contractor because they want to make sure there are enough people bidding on it, that they're not making it so tight that nobody will bid on it. So the industry forum was done in 2012, right? And early 2012. And if you look at it, the project had 15 major interchanges. It had 15 new bridges, 74 bridge replacements, and 13 widenings, and it had a substantial aesthetic concept that was associated with it. When we originally did it as 6 projects, nobody really envisioned it to be this, beautiful, almost a parkway effect through downtown, but they decided that, hey, we're getting this opportunity to do this for a 21-mile stretch, let's make it pretty, right? So the aesthetics were very integrated into the bridges and the walls and stuff, so that threw a whole new kink into our design side of it. So the project got bid. There were 4 people who moved forward. This was actually shortlisted because, I forgot to mention, so on a design build or any of these projects, FDOT gives you a stipend for the losing teams, right? So on a design build, so you saw how 4 people went after the design build. Usually the stipend's only for the 2 and 3 person. So number 4 will never get a stipend on it. Stipend really doesn't cover the cost of the overall proposal, but it's a little bit of a carrot to say, hey, you're spending all this time and effort, we're going to give you something, right? It's like 0.1% of the construction cost. It's pretty pathetic, right? So on an I-4 job, we had 4 people moving forward because the effort was so substantial that some of the people said they didn't want to move forward. But it had a full concession arm associated with it, and 40-year concession period includes the design and construction time frame. So our design and construction time frame is about 7 years. So it included all of that. So they have to basically operate and maintain for another 33 years past when they finish the job. And availability payment is, so even though they're tolling the roadway, right, the money's not coming out of the tolls. So the DOT, this one was funded where they had federal funds, they had a TIFIA, which is a grant fund, then they had state funds. So they already had about $900 million in the bucket. Then they asked the contractor to go get, actually it was over $1 billion, just over $1 billion. Then they said, okay, contractor, whatever the bid is, you have to finance the rest of it, right? And we'll pay you back in availability payments. So the way the availability payments work is the tolls are collected. Tolls are not just used for this project. It's basically used for anything within the District 5 system. But they collect it to they have their books to balance things. If they don't have the funding in their books, some of the tolls go into paying the availability payments. But the contractors already started getting payments, so they had milestones, right? After 2 years, if you complete X, we'll start giving you a payment. So the contractor is not sitting through 7 years financing this as a loan and not getting anything back and basically paying out of his pocket, right? I mean, not the contractor, the concessionaire. So this is a setup for a concessionaire team. So our team, the I-4 Mobility Partners, was a concessionaire. That team has a contract with FDOT, right? They have a direct contract with the FDOT. Then they contract the design build team, which is the contractors, which is a joint venture of Skanska, Granite, and Lane. And then they also have a separate contract with the operations and maintenance side, because that comes after SGL has already left. So that's a separate arm that concessionaire contracts with them. And then of course we come in, HDR Jacobs was a joint venture. For that larger job, it's hard for one team to do it. Everybody was basically a joint venture. And then the contractor also has a whole bunch of subcontractors. So anything that drops down, that's who your contract is with. So my contract is with SGL. So we're basically at the bottom of the totem pole, which is kind of a little difficult for us to handle. We're not used to that because concessionaire tends to dictate things sometimes. So the project itself was divided into 4 areas, the 21 miles. So we had to give it fancy names, right? Because you got to make your proposal pretty and make it exciting. So we called it the attractions area because it was close to Universal, right? And then you had the downtown, which was the major part of the project. Then you had the Ivanhoe, which is the Ivanhoe, Lake Ivanhoe and all of that north of downtown area. And Altamont is the city north of Maitland area that was basically the beginning of that section. So we called it those names, and those were basically the limits of the job itself, the total mileage. But there was a lot of work beyond I-4. So you can see 408, I know it's hard to see, but this is 408 running through here. In order to reconfigure this interchange, which was a major reconfiguration, right now it's like a trumpet with like all these merges that go back and forth. It's going to become a 4-level interchange. So everything is direct access, eastbound, westbound, and northbound, southbound on I-4. So it's kind of nice when it's done. So doing that ended up impacting the west side because a lot of the modifications were going towards the west. So we are actually going, I think, about 3.5 miles into 408 to tie down everything and reconstruct everything. And the same goes with Maitland. I can't even see Maitland. I'm getting old. Yeah, it's right up here. This is Maitland Boulevard. It's just south of Altamont. So Maitland Boulevard, DOT already had concepts where the at-grade intersections were going to be converted to interchanges because it's a very heavily commuter roadway, and they really wanted to get people through that system as fast as they could. One of our ATCs was, it was kind of odd that DOT left one intersection as an intersection. That was the beginning of the bottleneck, right? We did an ATC and said, convert that to an interchange too, then you have free flow coming right through. And we ended up getting that ATC, which was actually more price, right? But you got the points because you enhanced their design. So you kind of balance all that out. When we go through these iterations of ATC sessions that we do, I mean, everybody throws out all these things saying, why do you think that's a good idea? That's and contractors always like, that's more money, I don't want to do that, right? That's usually what you get back, but you have to kind of justify all of that. And project specifics, man, the biggest issue we had was the utility complex. So all these underground overhead utilities, because you can imagine we're taking this and putting it out. So there's stuff all along the right of way on the sides. So there were some sections of Maitland, people were asking me, there's so much construction going on, how come I don't see anything coming out of the ground? I said, it's all underground, because we had 8 months of relocation at Maitland, because there was so much, I mean, we had big trunk lines from Sprint coming through the interchange, we had to move all that trunk lines. So it was major work, and getting those utilities out of the way is key, because you don't want to go drive a pile and all of a sudden hit somebody, right? So that effort was quite substantial. And then of course you had the stakeholders. So even though the project was set, the scope was set, there are cities, especially City of Altamont was one of the ones that we struggled with a little bit. They always wanted something else, right? We're like, no, this is set. You go talk to the owner, and then they can come tell me to change my scope, and then they can pay me to change the scope, and I'll do it. So there's a lot of coordination that happens. In addition, you want to coordinate with the homeowners, show them where all the traffic shifts are happening, detours are happening, because that's one of the keys that we have to do detours at night. But the important part was the RFP was set up that we cannot reduce the lane configuration, reduce the number of ramp lanes on the structure. So we had to maintain what was given to us as the base footprint of the roadway. We had to maintain all those lanes and all those ramp lanes through construction. So that's why you see some things getting slower, because imagine doing the maintenance of traffic while maintaining everything. The only time we were allowed to do detours were, it depends on the road system, but it's usually between 11 and 5. We're talking about 6 hours of detour, that's all you can get, right? So one of the other big things that was a nuance that we as designers needed to keep up with, so each of the areas were its own projects, it had its own project managers. So the project managers really had to kind of coordinate between themselves, right, to make sure that this guy doesn't design this and he's got the extra lane coming through, but the next guy's lane hasn't come through, right? So you really had to work with each team to make sure, the contractor and the project manager, to make sure, hey, when I build this, are you coming at the same time? So there was a lot of coordination that had to happen. And incorporating all the aesthetics was like something that people made it as an afterthought. I'm like, no, this is not an afterthought. This is all part of your bridges and your interchanges. It's got to happen. So engineers, architects, you had a bunch of architects telling them, you gotta do this. You're like, no, we can't do that, so you had to kind of get all of them on the same page. And so the project was advertised in 2012. In 2013, they shortlisted us, and we submitted our proposal in February 2014, and we were selected. I will never forget this day because my life ended for 2 years after that. April 23rd, 2014. So we're coming up on 4 years since we got selected. 5 years, I'm sorry, since we got selected. So the project basically kicked off for us right after that, right? So it's a lot of heartache that you go through, right? So when you lose, it's very difficult to lose a job that bad. It's like you went through 2 years of like kind of working through all your ideas, and we were sitting at the selection. I mean, it was jam-packed, right? They did it at the Hillsborough, Orange County School Board. They had a big auditorium, and we were all sitting in one row, the entire contractor, designer team, and the team that was sitting next behind us was the other one that actually made the finance, because what happened was 4 teams went forward, 2 of them could not get the financing. Because it's such a large financing, they couldn't get enough financing partners to do it. So right off the bat, that's the first thing they look at. So they both dropped out, so it was down between us and another team. So you're sitting there, biting your fingernails and kind of hoping, do I want to win this? Yeah, I really want to win this, right? But it was like a deadpan silence when they put up the final score and they said I4MP is the apparent winner, because they had to go back and double check all the numbers. And there were people behind us patting us saying, hey, congrats, and I'm just sitting there staring at them, oh, there goes my life, So, but it was a fun job. I mean, there's not very often you get to say, hey, I worked on a $2.3 billion job. It was kind of a neat set of issues. So now it's time to show you some pretty pictures. I don't know, can you see that? So aesthetics it was amazing, the aesthetics on this. These are our renderings that we did as part of the proposal. So the view you're looking at, you can see some of the tall buildings in the back. It's an evening view of the downtown of Orlando. This is the Lake Ivanhoe area, the Ivanhoe section that I was talking about. This is where it kind of, on the other side is where it kind of starts. So see these pylons that you see up here? So the pylons had significance in certain locations. In this location, since it was express lanes, there are direct access that you come in. I don't know if you can see these lanes. See these lanes coming in, like coming up as a ramp into the express lanes? That is the ingress and egress coming into the express lane from downtown, right? So if you're coming off of the Ivanhoe downtown area, you don't even get on I-4, you come through this, get on it. If you want to go north, you go north. If you want to go south, you just go south. And they have other spots, so it's not like you're going the whole stretch without any means of getting off at any other ramp. They have some slip ramps to get off at certain key locations. So this is one of the renderings. This is actually the Maitland interchange. If you're familiar with the Maitland interchange, this is not what it looks like in the old form. It is going to look amazing. This is actually a very well laid out interchange in terms of making sure the improvements are going to help the commuters and the travelers. This is the downtown interchange. This picture doesn't give you the justice of the 4 levels, but it's basically a 4-level interchange at 408, right through downtown. And the fun part that we have is our office is off of the SunTrust building right next to I-4, so we look out and we see the downtown construction all the time. So it's kind of nice to be able to see the construction happening right behind our office. And this here is downtown Orlando at Church Street. So this is the stretch that all of the downtown Orlando, so like I said, that one's a pylon not because it's a direct access, it's because it's a key downtown street, right? So we had pylons established there. Some of the pylons were asked by the client, some of them we actually incorporated based on our theme for the project. So the colors you see, you could change the colors for like the Orlando Magic or the Solar Bears. So we have color schemes that you can switch it out to, because the parking garages for this area, there's a couple so the Amway Center is on the other side of this. Okay, so you're looking at it from my office side. Our office is actually right off of the street off of Church. So you see those tents and stuff? That's how Amway Center is usually set up for any program. So people tend to park in our garage and the garage next to it and walk across, and this whole area gets shut down at night when there's a game or an event going on. So that's why we wanted to enhance it to show you. And they're gonna have like vendors down there.
Food trucks there.
Yeah, they have food trucks. So what the city is looking at doing, they have a project coming through that's called the Under Eye. So this whole stretch right west of here is where the viaduct starts. It's all elevated. It's all on columns, right? So they have all that under the I-4 area to do what they want to do. So they're trying to, rejuvenate the city by making it like, art festivals, things like that, right under it. Because there's enough parking garages around it, so it's a great spot, and you don't get rained on because I-4 is right above you, so it's kind of a nice location. So challenges during design. change is inevitable. I already talked about it, right? There's lots of change that always happens. And stakeholder coordination changes, we already talked about several of those. Keeping up with the team, that was the biggest challenge that we had as me as a design manager for Jacobs, and I had a counterpart from HDR, Larry. We had to kind of keep up with the team to make sure they're not getting burnt out because there was so much going on. People were so focused on delivering projects that we really had to take rotations to take vacations. I'm talking vacations like 3 days, right? You get a 3-day weekend, right? So that we could let people go take a break with their family, do something, and come back. Because people don't realize that the project is such a fast burn. So when you have that level of effort, people get focused and tend to forget about personal life, and you don't want people struggling through their personal life because we made them work too much. So our job, since we were sitting more on the higher level, not the day-to-day design people, that's kind of what I kept up with quite a bit with my team. So, and then tracking deliverables. So the way we broke up the job is HDR, the lead, Larry, was responsible to make sure we had consistency in design. So like I said, between the different areas to make sure things could be constructed in sequence and there was no issues, and meeting the owner's criteria. My job was to deliver the 21 miles and a gazillion packages, right? Everything was broken into tiny packages, right? Well, guess what the contractor wanted? The packages, right?
Yeah.
So I was the one getting beat up all the time saying, your package is a day late, what's going on, right? So it's fun, it's kind of one of those things you build a partnership so that you kind of like blow it up saying it's coming, don't worry, the sky's not falling that much, so. Plan early, that's one thing that since Jacobs had done several, actually we've done several P3s and have done major DB projects that I had feedback from some of the people. We had just, we were midway through the Ohio River Bridge projects. There was 2 sections on that, and that was about a $1.2 billion job. So I was actually communicating with some of those managers saying, hey, how did you establish this project? Because it's not like because we won it in the Orlando office, we went and hired all these people to do the job, because this is a quick burn, so you have to have future work for them. So you really have to look at teams in all the different offices. So Jacobs, the main teams that we had were in St. Louis, Dallas, Texas, and in New York. But then we had all these other offices supporting us for certain elements. So you identify the point of contact, saying, okay, do you have these expertises? This is what we want to send your way. So you would take a couple of interchanges and send it their way, so that they have the roadway, they have the bridge and all of that, and then you just coordinate with them, right? And we did hire a few people, but in addition, we also brought people on TDY. TDY is basically temporary duty. They come down for a year and work in our office, so we pay them to come down and sit in our office. So that was another mass blast that went out way before we won this job, because I had to have that all lined up, because I was told, the contractor was like, I'm gonna give you NTP within 2 weeks, right? So you better be ready to start design, so you wanna be ready. So you gotta really plan early to make sure you're ready for this job. So April 23rd, we won the job. June 1, we got our NTP. And our contract basically said that we will have the design substantially completed, substantial completion in the contract terms for 90% of the 21-mile complete RFC plans, right? Signed and sealed and ready to construct in 18 months. That was what we were on the hook for. So that's why it became such a burnout, because 18 months is a short time to do 21 miles with all those bridges and all of that. So we struggled a little bit with that schedule. So as you can see, we started design in June of 2014, and the construction began in March of 2015. So you see how fast something and it was not construction of just one piece, it was across the 21 miles. There were different pieces getting cleared, and utilities were getting relocated, and all of that was happening. But the other challenge we had was, so since the construction started on March 2015, you have to have the support for the contractor asking questions from the field, right? While we are still designing. So contractors started asking us questions March 2015, and we weren't anywhere near done with design. So we had to identify additional people who kind of review these RFIs when they came in, so that the engineer of record can focus on what they're designing and getting that RFC. So some of those things was a little bit of a learning curve about, we didn't realize how many questions were gonna come our way, and there was quite a bit coming our way, so we had to identify additional people to do that. So current status, it's 60% complete in the field. We have a team that's in the project office. We have a project office at Maitland, which has the contractor, the concessionaire, the owner, and we have a skeletal crew now because it's only post-design services. They only manage the post-design, and they ship everything to the home offices for reviews and all of that. So we have a team sitting in the project office, and the rest of the effort comes from the home office for the post-design services. I figured I'll end with the Maitland Pedestrian Bridge. So So this is going to be an amazing bridge when it's done. It's a arch bridge with the suspended pedestrian walkway. I think the total span length is 650 feet, and the arch goes up about 135 feet into the air. So it's a massive structure that's coming up. So they have just finished the foundations, and they're getting ready to do the support structures, because all of these, this is a rectangular, it's rectangular sections that they have to build like a Lego building block, so they
Is
need.
it concrete?
No,
Or steel?
it's steel,
Okay.
steel. And it needed to accommodate inspections inside and all of that, so
Wow.
it was a very complicated bridge. So this was one that the contractor, so the DOT had like a regular, nice bridge, but a regular bridge, right? It was a tight arch bridge. And contractor said, we're gonna get points on this bridge. We wanna change this, and brought an architect in. And they came up with a design that became a nightmare to design. So yeah, this has been a heartache for everybody. So I'm a little paranoid because my designers in Tampa are the ones who designed this. So I'm waiting for it to go up, and hopefully
Yes.
everything goes up fine. So, I mean, the design's not the problem, it's the construction sequencing, because you gotta remember, it's gonna take them a while to build it, and they have huge towers. It's 135 feet, so they have towers that have to go up with the MOT phasing. What happens to hurricane season, right? So they gotta time everything to get some of the top pieces done when there's not that wind effects, even though their towers are designed for it. Their construction engineer designed all of that, but you know how hurricanes happen, so we're all kind of holding our breath till this bridge is done. But that's all I have, guys.
And when is the whole program gonna be completed?
So the original schedule was March of 2021. Due to some changes and issues that were drastic enough in the field, the contractor has actually said it won't happen by March 2021. It'll probably happen end of March is what they're saying.
Okay.
You know, they're working with the owner to figure
2
out.
more years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, yes.
So going back to the contract types, so design build, in my understanding, should be the cheapest. Design build finance is the next more expensive one.
Mhm.
And P3 should be like the most expensive one, right?
Technically for the contractor side, right, but you gotta look at it, so for an owner, it looks like it's expensive, right? The design build finance, yes, will be slightly more expensive because you're paying that interest on the loan that a contractor is getting. But design build finance, operate, maintain, the owner has to maintain and do certain things. So you gotta kind of subtract that cost out of the overall cost, so you can look at it as, hey, this is the overall cost that the owner is paying, and this is what it would have cost if you constructed it with your own money, because you're not maintaining it either anymore for 40 years.
And also, if the construction is shorter, your exposure to the risks of construction are much shorter.
Yep.
So exposure for crashes and
Yep.
and injuries and so on.
Because that's the other thing, I mean, there's plenty of lawsuits already going on this one.
Yeah.
You know, that's normal on jobs this big. But it's going really well. We actually opened some major sections through downtown, north of downtown through Ivanhoe. So they've shifted everybody to the outside, you know, south side that is running on the new system, you know, so it's pretty nice. It's all, and you gotta remember some of this elevation differences through downtown and north of downtown was up to 8 feet that was getting built up. So that's why, I mean, I will tell you one thing, one of the, few of the comments I've gotten from the public has been, they've been able to watch this thing being built, and it's so massively different from what was over there. And I've actually had lay public friends of mine say, my God, now I understand this, why this job was so complicated, because they don't, right? Till they see it, something shooting up out of the ground, and they say, that's where the road's going? And they're like, yep, that's where the road's going now, you know? Because clearance requirements have changed since when I-4 was originally built. So you gotta make sure everything ties down correctly. So yeah, it has been a positive from the public, which has been surprising, you know, because all they do is complain. But yeah, they have actually been appreciative when we have shifted to like the new lane system. They're like, wow, this is nice. You know, we want the final product. Then of course they're in a hurry. When is this getting done? I want the job done. You know, I want to drive on the new roadway. But yeah, if you guys haven't been to Orlando, at least go now to see how the effect is, and definitely go back and see when it's done. I think it's going to look amazing. Questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Like additional to Andy's question. So when you're organizing the construction, let's say from the owner's perspective, let's say if they will hire a separate design team and separate contractor, and like you said, like if they hire just one contractor and he does all the stuff, they are transferring the risk, but the risk is related to money, so it's becoming more expensive for the owner. And let's say if you want to make additional changes, like all the price will go up or down. So what was the final, like say, like how much more they will pay for that?
So when you look at the risk standpoint, that's why it's important to do your RFP so well, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to want to make a lot of changes because you want it to be very clear what the contractor is bidding on. The reason the bid isn't, the price is not going to be much higher, the contractor is hungry to win the job. So the contractor is going to figure out ways to lower the bid. You can say what you want unless you had a horrible technical score. Usually bid is what's winning the job. So the contractors have figured that out on design builds that the P3, the I4, bid is what won the job. Because we were much lower than other people, and that was something that everybody noticed too, that we were substantially lower than other people. So the owner doesn't really get an increase in cost because of it, because the contractors tightening their belt constantly because they want to beat the other people. And the score comes into play mainly when there's a big difference in the scores, right? But because the early stage, the phase 1 is just purely on 20 points, it's based on qualifications and certain criteria, it's hard to swing the score too much, because unless you really had a terrible qualification list or a terrible history of accidents for the contractor and stuff, they don't swing the score. So the scores are always very tight, they're next to each other. So then the price becomes important, because that score is not going to make the difference for them. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else?
Did you make any things like for especially autonomous vehicles in your project?
Not in I4, because you got to remember this was way before the AVs became so popular, right? Because if you think about the industry forum happening in 2012, the RFP was written, majority of it, in 2009. Way before all of this. So then they were just tweaking the RFP on what they wanted, because the project, like I said, when I was doing the program, we had written an RFP and they were just tweaking it to kind of identify additional things that they wanted to add to it. So it was way before the AV came through, so this project definitely does not have AV implications with it. So it's something that, Central Florida Expressway Authority, which has the 408 system, they're actually looking at some projects right now as pilot projects to set it up for AV, right? To say, we can make it a test bed as like the inner lanes for people to do AV testing. So
Did you give any flexibility to do that?
no, not in this one. No. Mm-mm.
So if something should happen, it should should be reconstructed.
Not necessarily, because a lot of the AV stuff, so what would probably be something they'd look at is, so we got 2 lanes in each direction, right? And it's barrier separated from the general purpose lane. So the 2 lanes in each direction, you could always make one as a dedicated AV lane, because a lot of the AV stuff is based on your lane markings and things like that. So you can switch one of the lanes to AV, but it'll need work on it, but it won't be a complete reconstruction of it.
Well, we may have time for one more question.
Okay. Sorry.
Any other question?
How does the allocating risks through indemnity provisions work out in the projects that you do? Like
So-
whenever you're going for bidding for any project, how do you actually allocate any probable risk that's going to happen in the project?
So each team member has their own indemnity
Yes.
allocations that we have to deal with. So when we do our terms and conditions with the contractor, we have the limits on liability, the indemnification clauses that we only agree to certain things, because
Like
we don't.
how that concept of surety bonds actually happen? Who has to give that? Who has to?
So on I4, we actually had a project-specific, the bond comes from the contractor and
Okay.
I4MP, right? So I4MP is bonding for their OM portion of it, because as a consultant doing the operations and maintenance, the contractor is bonding, so the 3 joint venture people are the ones bonding for their indemnification, right? Our job is to make sure that they don't drag us into their construction indemnity clauses and on the limits on liability, because the liability can be purely based on construction, not design. So those are the nuances that we deal with quite a lot to make sure the contract language doesn't drag us into something we shouldn't be dragged into. So for example, when a claim comes in, we truly look at it, was it a design claim or was it a construction claim? So if it's a design claim, our project-specific policy won't get hit.
Because sometimes one party has to actually support another party in case of an indemnity provision, so that's why I
Yeah.
wanted to ask this question.
Yeah.
So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Lory.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
very much. So like 2 weeks ago, we heard from EFTA regarding the Tampa Bay Next project.